Story number 1. The Red Balloon. Summer's great and all, but most of my summers when I was growing up involved getting part-time jobs. I didn't have physical strength. I wasn't the smartest kid in class. I wasn't good-looking. Heck, I wasn't even charming. I didn't have anything. So I thought I could be the guy who has money. Heck, I could even be the guy who has a car. That's what I had my eye on. I was saving every single penny I made, and I was going to buy the cheapest and crappiest car there was, but it would still be a car. Anyway, that's why I took the job cleaning the rides at the summer carnival. It wasn't a glamorous job. Cleaning up popcorn kernels, spilled sticky soda, and the occasional vomit puddle was more than worth it. The only thing I couldn't stand was the clowns. I know, I already sound lame enough. Now, I'm scared of clowns. It's not that simple. I've never met a clown that wasn't creepy, strange, or just plain wrong. These clowns were no exception. They didn't wear your usual happy and colorful makeup. Their makeup was black and white, along with their puffy, bland clothes, and the faces they painted on were all of large frowns or nasty snarls. One day, I was cleaning up after a particularly nasty group of kids from some toddler's birthday party. The mess almost had me cleaning up my own vomit. After finishing up at the roller coaster, the group of kids moved over to the clown tent. You know how you usually see a bunch of clowns squeeze into a tiny car? They do that with their tent. The tent was tiny, but somehow all the clowns fit inside of it. The kids sat down in front of the tent. One by one, the clowns climbed out, and the show began. As much as I hated clowns, the show they put on was actually entertaining. They breathed fire, juggled plates, and there was these two skinny guys who did a few acrobatic moves. They did something new that day. I had been working there for over a month, but that was the first time I heard of them doing a magic show. They called up one of the kids to volunteer, and that was when I noticed that none of the kids' parents were around. Aside from the clowns, I was the only adult there. The clowns seemed even more sinister to me that day as they gave the kid that volunteered a red balloon and told him to climb inside the box. The red balloon stuck out through a small hole in the top of the box, and everyone kept their eyes on it. The clowns made a show of it. They opened up the box, and the balloon was still there, but the kid was gone. I gasped, and my mop dropped to the floor. The clanging sound the metal handle made as it bounced off the tiles echoed out, and the clowns glared up at me. After that, everything happened quickly. The group of kids cheered loudly and clapped. It seemed like a few of the parents showed up. The one clown bowed and thanked the crowd while the others began packing up. I was too shocked to believe what was happening. The parents were clapping and smiling. They didn't see. They didn't know. The clowns began disappearing into the tent one by one, and my brain kicked into overdrive. I shot off towards them. My feet had never carried me so far, so fast before. I screamed at them to stop. I made it to the tent just before the last clown would climb inside. I grabbed hold of him, and I didn't let go. At first, the parents of the kids were ready to start a fight with me. I was quick to explain myself. Soon, the clowns were under attack, and the police eventually got involved. Thankfully, they found the kid. He was locked inside one of the trunks the clowns used for their makeup. I worked at the carnival for the rest of the summer, but I'm glad to report that I never saw those clowns again. Story number 2. The Older Kids. When I was a little girl, going to the carnival used to be the best thing that could happen to me. My family was poor, so it didn't happen very often. Whenever my dad had a good day at work or my mom had a little money saved up, they would treat us to a trip to the carnival. The area I grew up in was like a tourist magnet, which meant there were a lot of carnivals that were held in a small clearing just outside of my town. The clearing was right next to an abandoned railway station. It was usually off limits, but one day when my mom took me and my little brother to the carnival, I noticed that there were a couple of older kids playing by the tracks. The carnival was nothing special. There were a lot of rides, but most of them were small and boring. My little brother was having the time of his life. I remember when I was a lot younger and the rides were fun for me too. Now, they were just too little and went too slow. I kept looking over to the railway tracks. The older kids were laughing so loudly, I could hear them over the music from the carnival. We got cotton candy and soda. I enjoyed that part. I remember watching my little brother eat the whole thing in one big bite and then proceed to hold his head in pain from the sugar rush. I laughed loudly. It was one of those genuine laughs that came from your belly and made your cheeks hurt. That was when they noticed me. The older kids from the railway tracks looked over at me, and I spotted one of them smiling. I didn't think anything of it back then, but now I shudder whenever I try to imagine what they might have been thinking in that moment. After a moment, my little brother started to cry. The pain from the sugar rush was too much. I wasn't laughing anymore. My mom had to take him to the bathrooms to clean him up and get him to stop crying. I remember insisting that I didn't need to go with. I was grown up in my mind. I didn't want to follow my mom and my little brother into the boys' bathroom, and I didn't want her to bring my little brother into the girls' bathroom either. I'm not sure why, but my mom actually agreed to let me stay there on my own. She carried my brother off. I felt so free. I was just sitting on a bench, drinking my soda and eating my cotton candy. It was such a small thing, but for 10-year-old me, it was amazing. That was when the older kids came over from the railway tracks. They were all boys. I didn't notice that until they got closer. A lot of them had long hair, so from a distance I thought that some of them were girls too. One of the boys sat down beside me on the bench. They chatted with me for a bit. I don't really remember what they told me, but somehow they convinced me that it would be fun to go to the train tracks with them. I was nervous. My first instinct was to look around for my mom, but for some reason I didn't want to seem lame in front of them. I gave them a smile and nodded. The boy put his hand on the small of my back and pushed me gently as we walked towards the railway tracks. I shiver now when I think about him touching me. The closer we got to the railway tracks, the more nervous I felt. I tried to stop, but the boy pushed his hand against my back harder. The other boys gathered around me. It was as if they were trying to hide me from anyone who might see, or they were trying to make it harder for me to run away. I don't know what came over me, but just as they were about to push me onto the tracks, I let out a scream. It was one of those high-pitched, little girl screams. I wasn't proud of it, but it got the job done. I got the attention of several people at the carnival, and all the boys jumped away from me. I saw my chance, and I ran for it. The boys walked it off, huffing at me and going back to the tracks alone. I ran straight past the bench where my mom left me and went to find her at the bathrooms. Needless to say, it was a long time before she left me alone again, and we never went back to the carnival. I still don't know exactly what those boys wanted to do to me, and I don't want to think about it. Story number 3. House of Mirrors. I like to scare myself. That's not a weird thing for a healthy young man to do. At least, that's what my father tells himself whenever he has to run into my room because I was screaming so loud at something that happened in a movie that he thought I was being murdered. I like watching horror movies. I like sitting in the dark all by myself, and I like going to the Haunted House Festival. They host the Haunted House Festival every Halloween. It starts early in the day. That's when all the little kids go. They get their trick-or-treating done and go home before the sun sets. Once it's dark, that's when the real fun starts. The kiddie rides are put away, and the really scary stuff come out. That's when they bring out the zombie hunt, the freak show, the hayride through the forbidden woods, the graveyard picnic, and the House of Mirrors right in the middle of all of it. The House of Mirrors was my favorite. Not only could I scare myself, but I got to hide in there and scare everyone else too. I wanted to do something different last year, so I decided to dress up. I used my arts and crafts and woodshop skills to make myself an old-looking tribal mask. It didn't matter what else I wore, because the mask was going to be scary enough. I got to the festival early. All the kids had left, but it wasn't dark yet, and the fanatics hadn't arrived. I hid myself in the House of Mirrors. I had a bag filled with snacks, drinks, and something warm to wear if it got really cold. I was ready for a full night of terror. The festival got busy, and I had the time of my life. Everyone that entered the House of Mirrors left screaming. I know it sounds sadistic, but I actually like hearing them scream. It made the whole thing a lot more fun. I got better at it as the night went on. The mirrors helped a lot, making it so I was surrounding the person I jumped out at. I kept going until a little past 2 in the morning, when people stopped coming in. I hadn't realized it was so late until the quiet made me check my watch. I was sad that it was all over, but I grabbed my bag and got ready to head home. As I was leaving, I stopped and took a moment to admire my mask in the mirrors. My own reflection surrounded me. I laughed and posed. I growled at my own reflection and acted pretty scary. I spun round, admiring myself for longer than I care to admit. That was when I noticed it. One of my reflections wasn't moving with me. It was wearing my mask and my clothes, but it was completely still, even though I was spinning around. I stopped spinning and eyed the reflection closer. I stared straight at it. I forced myself not to blink, no matter how dry my eyes felt. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or I was tired and seeing things. Those were the thoughts I used to stop myself from shaking. I decided to test it. I raised my left hand. I fully expected this reflection to act like all of my other reflections and copy me. I gasped and jumped back when, once again, the reflection didn't move a muscle. It stood there like a statue and stared right at me. Slowly, I realized that it wasn't my reflection. Someone else was in there with me. I wasn't sure how he was wearing the same mask as me since I made my own mask. I was more worried about where he really was. I'd been inside the House of Mirrors long enough to know all of its tricks. The reflection made it seem like he was right in front of me, but he could be anywhere. Suddenly, the reflection broke into a sprint. I gasped and stumbled back, expecting to feel the cold glass of a mirror behind me. The reflection darted straight towards me. The other reflections around me still belonged to me and followed my movements. There was only one reflection of my attacker coming straight at me. That was when I figured it out. My attacker was behind me. I ducked down just as the man shot past me. He crashed headfirst into his own reflection, and the mirror shattered. He fell to the ground along with the pieces of glass. I turned and dashed out the way he ran in. The mirrors threw me off a bit, but I was still able to find my way out of there. I didn't look behind me to see if he was following. I didn't bother stopping to tell any of the festival workers. I ran as fast as I could, and I didn't stop until I was safely behind my bedroom door. I collapsed, breathless, on my bedroom floor. The next night, I started a fire and burned that mask. I've hated all things creepy and scary ever since.